Hello, DawgNation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Meriwether Tharp. We just had a really fun 1st and 15 there at DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app. So we would invite you to join us over there. We start at 9:45. We take your comments. We just sort of chat and kind of set the stage for the show that it's on its way. I think we've got a really good show coming up for you today, and it obviously on a Thursday involves Terence Edwards. And by the way, how great was Terence last week on the DawgNation postgame show immediately after the game, presented by the UGA Bookstore. He'll be back for that with us here this week there as well. So great chance to talk to Terence after the game, but we'll also talk to him today. What he saw from Georgia offense, what he'd like to see more of. We'll do a lot of that with Terence Edwards here coming up in just a little bit. Also, one of the big things that we saw from UGA on Saturday that was maybe a little different than we might would have expected. Well, in retrospect, maybe Kirby Smart actually previewed that and tipped us off to that in the offseason, and maybe we weren't paying attention as much to that as we probably should have been. I'll tell you more about that here coming up. But before that, though, a Georgia player has had a little bit of a joke on social media, which I think is pretty funny. And I just think it's a great way to frame what was a really spectacular start to the season for Georgia and sort of set the anticipation for what we might also see this upcoming Saturday against Samford. So we'll get things going there on that. We'll hear from a couple of Georgia players on the show today. It is fully loaded, as you would expect, as we roll towards the second game of the season for these Dogs coming up against Samford in the home opener on Saturday afternoon. So it is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Meriwether Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Meriwether Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
If I could buy stock in someone's NIL value, I think a guy that might be a good idea to get on the ground floor on is a guy like Brett Thorson, the Georgia punter. Which I know that sounds kind of crazy because he's only a punter, but there are a couple things going on here. First of all, Americans sort of always had a little bit of a fascination with Australians, and from that standpoint, I think that Thorson has a chance to be considered pretty interesting by a lot of UGA fans. And there's also this precedent here there as well that a couple of years ago, a guy like Rodrigo Blankenship was, one of the most popular Bulldogs in recent memory as a place kicker, something you don't always see. So Georgia fans have a little bit of a history of kind of gravitating towards specialists. A guy like Thorson seems to have a pretty interesting personality, and he kind of comes from this sort of unusual backstory in a way that, a lot of SEC football fans aren't kind of used to. So all that sort of speaks to a guy that over the course of his time at UGA, even though it's a punter, I think has a chance to kind of make a little bit of a name for himself with UGA fans and has a chance to maybe cash in on that fame over the course of years. And I was thinking about that a little bit yesterday because Brett Thorson, the Georgia punter, ill-used on Saturday, just one chance to get into the game. It happened late after 7 consecutive drives for the Georgia Bulldogs, resulted in touchdowns. But Thorson had a joke on Twitter that I thought was really funny, and to me it just sort of perfectly encapsulates what Saturday was for Georgia. Let me show you Brett Thorson on the screen here, who's kind of showing off some of that personality I told you that he already has. So Thorson tweets a couple photos of himself and says, "Game 1 takeaway. Stetson Bennett hates Australians," which is really funny because obviously Bennett was leading all those scoring drives and, Georgia was just getting touchdowns. You never had a chance to see Brett Thorson. Now, what's funny about Thorson's tweet is that some of y'all during the game had actually made a similar joke to me. At least one person. I went back and tried to find the tweet, and I couldn't find it, so I'm not going to properly give credit here the way that I should. But somebody had tweeted at me something to the effect of, "BA, my only concern about this game against Oregon thus far is I'm afraid Brett Thorson may go in the transfer portal if things continue to go the way they're going right now." And that's kind of funny, and it's funny to see Thorson making a similar joke. And as I told, I think it was John Stinchcomb on Monday, I said there was a weird point kind of late in the game against Oregon where I almost found myself sort of rooting against the Georgia offense, at least a little bit, because I was a little bit curious about what Brett Thorson was bringing to the table, how good the punting situation would be for UGA. Obviously, a real weapon for the Dogs last year was a guy like Jay Camarda, field position on kickoffs and obviously punts. And, you don't want your team to punt, but when you do punt, you want to have a good punter, and you wanted to see what Thorson bring to the table. Well, he certainly boomed one when he got a chance to to get in there. One of our YouTube commenters, the nickname he's created for Thorson is the Booming Onion, which I think is really funny. But when he got in there and had a chance to punt, he certainly boomed one there in that moment. So all seemed well, even in the kind of the light work that he got there on Saturday. But in a lot of ways, Thorson's joke, I think, kind of really tells the tale for what it was for the Dogs. It was one of those deals where the punter standing on the sidelines bored because the offense is moving down the field, play after play after play. And as we've told you both this week and in previous weeks and in really over the course of the last year, that if you kind of want to thin slice this and just sort of get it down to what really matters for Georgia, does it look like they're having fun? And if it looks like they're having fun, if players are laughing and backslapping and high-fiving and smiling and saying good things after the game, then you may not need to see the stat sheet, and you may not need even to see the scoreboard, that all of those things are pointing the direction they need to be, because when college football is working the way that it's supposed to work, it is fun. And when talent like that, which Georgia has, is unleashed, it is the kind of thing that is going to be enjoyable to be a part of, because who wouldn't want to succeed and who wouldn't want to go out there and make it look easy? And on Saturday, that's exactly what Georgia did. And so Brett Thorson kind of joked about it, but in a more serious kind of frame of reference, A.D. Mitchell, the Georgia wide receiver, was also talking about it yesterday there as well, about as a player in this offense, someone who was effective last season, someone who was effective there against the Oregon Ducks, kind of what he sees from the perspective of a defense trying to stop all of this right now. I thought A.D. Mitchell, in really only kind of a few words, summed a lot of this up pretty well when he spoke to reporters the last night.
It's kind of hard to game plan an offense like that, where everybody is getting their fair share and everybody's explosive in their own aspect. So I love it.
That's not a lot of words from Mitchell, but it's sort of saying all that needs to be said. He says it's hard to game plan against this when everybody's explosive. And that's what Saturday sort of looked like, didn't it? It sort of looked like one of those deals where, and to me, this is where the game is moving. It's not just deep passes and it's not just running game. It's sort of everything all at once at the same time. It's one of those deals where, hey, you want to put a defense in conflict. You want to force them to guess, and if you're talented enough, then you're going to put them in a position where they're likely guessing wrong because they're trying to come here and you're going there. They're zigging, you're zagging. That's what modern football seems to be about. It's about putting a defense in conflict, forcing them to make a guess for what they think you're going to do, and then punishing them, punishing that defense for guessing wrong. But in order for that to happen, as A.D. Mitchell kind of points out there, you got to be good everywhere. You got to have talented running backs. You got to have depth at the tight end. You've got to have wide receivers there too. It can't just be one guy as the focal point for the entire offense, because even with inferior talent, if it's just one guy that has to be keyed on, and if it's just one guy that has to be stopped, well, eventually even an average defense can do something to take that away. But if you've got so many different components to your offense that it all can't be taken away, well, at that point in time, then that's the kind of success story that Georgia put together against Oregon on Saturday. And there is, I think, a sense in which UGA fans are still kind of appreciating that and going back and rewatching some of that game film and footage from this past Saturday and still kind of living in that moment of, hey, I saw my team play one of the most fun games it's probably put together in dismantling a team that came in last Saturday as the preseason number 11. And Georgia obviously did a lot right there in that game. But there's also kind of that mindset now of, okay, how do you spin it forward? Getting ready for Samford this Saturday, big step down we would perceive in competition. And, well, is there now going to be a little bit of a letdown? It might rain on Saturday. We've heard some talk about that. Georgia's certainly not going to be in the same kind of emotional frame of mind that it was playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium with a big national spotlight on it. Be a huge TV audience, as you know, tuning in for that game against Oregon. Is there a letdown now on all of this? Well, once again, A.D. Mitchell, who spoke so articulately a moment ago, told us last night that when it comes to these Dogs, right now their level of focus is going to remain the same no matter who it is they're playing. Once again, good stuff from A.D. Mitchell.
The standard doesn't need motivation. So, we kind of just been embracing that, saying, he says it, he done said it every team meeting this week. So, we just all buying in, and it's all about preparation at the end of the day. We just preparing how we would the national championship game.
So all of that from A.D. Mitchell leads me to a question. Okay, after seeing 49 points, against Oregon after having the punter joke about, hey, what about me? Do I get to be used? Do I get to be on this team? Do I get to have a role around here? After all the good vibes coming off the Oregon game, what do you want to see as an encore? Well, part of what I'd like to see is what A.D. Mitchell talked about there, is a team that shows the same killer instinct this Saturday that it showed last Saturday against Oregon, kind of showing that it's going to be up to its standard regardless of who the opponent is, and that's the mindset it's going to take throughout the season. I think we'd all kind of like to see that, and it's nice to hear Mitchell give voice to that. But beyond that, more specifically, there are a couple of things I'm kind of curious about here right now. We're going to talk more about running backs in a moment in a little bit different light, but we didn't see a ton of rushing attack from Georgia on Saturday. I don't want it to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust against Samford. Nobody does. But do you see more explosive runs? Do you see the running game become a little bit more of a combo punch to go along with what was clearly a potent passing attack? You know, a guy like Brock Bowers, who I've predicted to be the leading receiver for Georgia here this year, and listen, ultimately my prediction doesn't matter all that much, but clearly Bowers was the weapon for the Dogs in the passing game there last year. Maybe it's a little bit more of an ensemble cast here this season, but if Bowers is going to be that guy once again, then after 2 weeks, this is kind of the moment where you show that a bit. After Saturday, your season's, about 15% gone, something along those lines, that you're starting to cast some of the die for what you're going to look like in terms of a playing personality and a profile. So if Bowers is going to be a big part of all this again, at a higher statistical level than he was last year, this is kind of one of those moments where that, sort of steps up. And then beyond that, it's not just that I'm interested in what Georgia does. I'm sort of interested in what the reaction is to what Georgia does, even if it's somewhat silly. Most of us who would, watch this Georgia game closely, knowing who it is that Georgia's playing, Samford out of the FCS, if Georgia goes out there and scores 60 points or something like that, most of us would assume there is at least a little bit of that's opponent-driven, that, okay, you had these eye-popping stats, but consider who you played. But we also know this. A lot of national media people, sometimes they don't really do that. Sometimes they are just sort of scoreboard watchers and stat chasers. And what they would be doing in that instance is sort of pairing this stat line for a guy like Stetson Bennett, the other playmakers in this offense, along with the 49 that Georgia scored last week against Oregon. And all of a sudden, I think you could see after 2 weeks of this season, the Georgia offense being one of the big national stories that's out there in college football here right now. And even if some of that's a little bit inflated because of the fact that Georgia's playing an FCS foe, the fact of the matter is some of us might take some of that credit on behalf of Georgia and let the media sort of pat him on the back here for a little while. Now, Kirby's going to hate it, and Kirby's not going to want to hear it. But, for some of us, that might be kind of a nice change of pace considering where things have been, the narrative has been over the course of the last couple of years. So to kind of sum all this up, hey, Brett Thorson was joking about not getting used last week. He may not be used very much this week, and he may not be used very much all season long, because this is a Georgia offense that, at least on the basis of the 4 quarters that played this past Saturday, has a little bit of an edge to it. I think it's kind of enjoying the idea of being a dominant unit, and it's clearly going to continue, you'd assume, this Saturday against Samford, but it may continue for a long time after that as well. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Meriwether Tharp, and happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, we start at 9:45 for our first and 15 on the DawgNation.com and DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all kinds of video platforms. Happy to have you with us, whichever one of those you choose to use to consume the show. We're just really appreciative of you there on all of that. Also, quick message there as well. So yesterday, now this wasn't unanimous. Somebody said they were still having a problem, but it seems like the overwhelming majority of you, at least those who I've heard from, said the show appeared for you back again yesterday on the Apple Podcast player. So as I jokingly said on Twitter, our long national nightmare would appear to be over, and after 2 days of hiatus for whatever reason, we still don't quite know why, the show is now back, apparently on the Apple Podcast player. So y'all do me a favor, let me know if that remains true for you today. I should be able to sort of tell because you just sort of can. But y'all let me know if it kind of works out for you there on all of that, because we want to hear that. And for those of you that kind of did some outreach yesterday, and we kind of did some old school sort of high attendance Sunday outreach of, hey, go out and let folks know we miss them and let folks know that there's still a way where they can connect with us. For those of you that did that, we appreciate you doing that. And obviously, always great to have you as a part of the program. And for those of you that listen to the radio as well, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref each and every day at noon. That's always really fun, too. So y'all let me know about the Apple thing. I think we should be good there on the podcast, but you never quite know. Also, our friends at Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. We're so appreciative of what they do for us each and every week. We got a chance to see Bob, Ashley, and their beautiful family last week as part of the DawgNation Duck Hunt Tailgate. Big dog fans, just good people. It's one of my favorite things what we get a chance to do here at DawgNation is that we have a great collection of sponsors. We have a great collection of folks in our audience to help support those sponsors. It just feels really good to be a part of this community because of the people that make up that community. And for us, Meriwether and Tharp's a big part of that. However, I also know this, that for you, your own personal sense of community may be kind of upended right now. You may find yourself in the situation where your most important relationship, the one you have with your spouse, is maybe coming to an end. And I hate that. That sucks. I mean, it really does. Like, as sincerely as I know how to be, feel empathy for you if that's what you're going through. And if I could take it away from you, and so you didn't have to deal with it, obviously I would. But since I can't, let me try to do the next best thing here, which is put you in touch with an advocate who's going to walk through this with you. And sometimes there's a lot of value in that when you find yourself in a challenging situation, that the only way to make it better is to go through it. We'll go through it with someone. That is the best choice that you can make. And the single best choice you can make in this situation is to trust my friends at Meriwether and Tharp for that. They're your source for Georgia divorce. You can find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That website, once again, theatlantadivorceteam.com. They can explain the law. They can talk about how to leverage it to your benefit and set you up for more success in the next season of your life. So find our friends at Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce, online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That is theatlantadivorceteam.com. All right, we're going to get Terence Edwards here coming up in just a couple of minutes. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at Servpro. Now, a moment ago, we heard from Georgia wide receiver A.D. Mitchell. I want to talk here for a moment about another guy that we heard from yesterday. That's Georgia running back Kendall Milton. And first of all, I thought that Kendall was kind of a real bright spot for UGA, not just because he had a big game, finding the end zone, things like that. But I'll be honest with you, I wasn't quite so sure how healthy Milton was coming into that game. And sometimes we're sort of led to believe that, I don't know. It's always a guessing game of what's said about injuries and who's healthy and whatever else. And I sort of assumed that Milton must be less healthy than they were letting on, because that's typically the way these things kind of go. But on Saturday, he didn't seem to be, facing any ill effects from that hamstring whatsoever. It was really nice to see. He was, a really important part of the Georgia offense on Saturday. And a lot of that for him, and certainly Kenny McIntosh had more than 100 yards receiving. A lot of that kind of came through the air. Georgia really throwing to the running backs on Saturday. And Kendall Milton yesterday, when he spoke to reporters, said, hey, that as a part of this offense is something that he feels incredibly comfortable with. Let me let you hear Kendall Milton talking about the role of running backs in the passing game.
I would say I'm very comfortable. We had a big offseason just working with the quarterbacks, all the running backs, really just trying to put ourselves in position to, just get comfortable with that game. So at the end of the day, we want to be a force in multiple different aspects of the game. So, I'm super comfortable with the aspect, and I'm super excited that, we can open the offense in multiple dimensions.
So the stats, if you're interested, McIntosh had 9 catches, 117 yards. Milton had just the 1 catch, but it was for a touchdown. So clearly both of these running backs were very important for Georgia in its passing game on Saturday. And Milton, with speaking to reporters yesterday, went into even more detail about the fact that this wasn't something that he got to do very much at the Friday night level, and coming to college, this is something that he wanted to learn more about as he obviously sets himself up for what he hopes is an NFL future. And so here's a little bit more of Kendall Milton talking about his role as a pass catcher in this Georgia offense.
I've definitely made that a key focus. Talking with Coach McGee, I let him know that was one aspect that I wanted to work on, because coming in out of high school, I felt like, high school I didn't really catch the ball. It was mostly, just running the ball. So coming in, I let him know that I want to, by the time that it's my time to, move on, I want to be the complete back in all areas. And he's worked with me, countless times during the offseason, just trying to put me in those deep ball situations or those coming out the backfield situations. And I'm just thankful that, I have a coach that, is willing to put effort for me to be able to help make my dreams happen.
So I think that's really interesting. And he talks about wanting to be a complete back and kind of how that would, kind of go for him. And he obviously wanting to set himself up for the next level. And as you hear Kendall talk about that, and as you see what Kenny McIntosh did on Saturday, I think you're sort of reminded of something that Kirby Smart said in this offseason. And for a coach like Smart, who obviously is always seemingly looking to keep his cards close to the vest and certainly not looking to give anything away from a game planning standpoint, if you go back and listen to some of the statements that Smart made back during the offseason, at least one of those may have actually tipped off pretty well what Georgia did on Saturday in terms of what Kirby Smart told you a few months ago that they want to do as kind of a factory for future NFL running backs, and specifically what that means here in 2022. Smart from the offseason kind of foreshadowing what both Milton and McIntosh did on Saturday. Here's Kirby.
In college football, you become a weapon by how you receive the ball out of the backfield. They want to grow at that. They want to be able to showcase their talents catching the ball out of the backfield. So the NFL asks about, can he catch the ball out of the backfield? Can he be a third down back? Well, we like to grow NFL backs here. So to do that, you got to use them in the passing game.
Isn't that interesting? That's Kirby Smart, essentially Babe Ruth style, calling a shot in the offseason. Hey, we want to grow NFL running backs, which means we want to make them weapons in the passing game. Lo and behold, on Saturday, that's exactly what they did with Milton's touchdown, with McIntosh, who actually led Georgia in receiving yards. Now, here's what's also kind of interesting, too, is that not only does Georgia seem to be cultivating this right now, Georgia may actually about to be getting a little earned media for this as well. Tonight, is the start of the NFL season. You're going to have to find it on Amazon Prime, which is the first time for us doing that here in the regular season. But when it comes to this, Thursday night season kickoff type deal with the Rams taking on, actually it's tonight's game on NBC. Maybe game's not on Amazon tonight. Maybe tonight's on NBC. But either way, it's Thursday night between the Rams and the Bills. And obviously for Buffalo, one of their key pieces this year, you think anyway, is going to be former Georgia running back James Cook. And much the same way Kirby Smart says, hey, we want to grow running backs that catch the ball out of the backfield, and that's how they use Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh on Saturday. You may also see a former Georgia running back make a pretty big name for himself in the NFL this year for doing some of the same kind of stuff. A lot of that stuff that he did while at Georgia there as well. And suddenly this may become a little bit of the way in which folks think about Georgia when they think about the Dogs, these athletic running backs who are also weapons in the passing game. In fact, let me let you hear Thomas Davis. You know him as the former Georgia linebacker, long career in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers, now working with the NFL Network. He was asked on TV the other day, hey, of all these sort of newcomers to the Buffalo Bills, if you think about Buffalo trying to take that next step and make the Super Bowl, which of these new players matters most of all? And you might not be surprised that the former Dog Davis zeroed in on the former Dog James Cook. Let's keep the theme going of UGA running backs catching the football. Here's Thomas Davis.
I got to go with a guy out of the University of Georgia, my boy Cooks. I'm a homer. Y'all know it. I got to go with my boy Cooks. I was around McDermott and Brandon Bean for a very long time in Carolina. And I know that they love me so much they had to go draft another Georgia Bulldog in James Cook. They had to bring James into the fold. He's a very versatile player. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he did a great job for us at Georgia running between the tackles. So James Cook, by far, with the way that their running game has struggled, is going to be a very valuable piece to that offense.
First of all, some of y'all talk sometimes about like former Dogs in the media and who sort of keeps a sort of a pro-Georgia slant and who doesn't. Thomas Davis right there is keeping it dog for sure. That's a guy that's definitely in kind of a pro-Georgia mindset there as he talks about James Cook, which is kind of nice to hear. But isn't that sort of interesting that Davis says, hey, watch out for James Cook. We'll see this tonight. A primetime showdown against the L.A. Rams. A former Dog maybe being used as a big weapon in that potent passing attack for the Buffalo Bills, and all of a sudden we can kind of pair that with what Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton are doing too, and it kind of all kind of goes back to what Kirby Smart said a little early in the summer, that a place like Georgia that's kind of long been known as RBU, now RBU maybe means just something a little bit different now. All of a sudden now it also means catching the ball out of the backfield, and we may see a lot more of that from the Dogs here this season and those Dogs in the NFL there as well. That is Around the Doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at Servpro, and we love what Servpro can do for you because think about the real estate that you own. For some of you, that's a house. For some of you, that's a commercial property. It's a business. It's where you house your livelihood. And think about damage taking place to that piece of property, whether it be your home or your business, whatever else, fire, water intrusion, the kinds of things that can happen. That leaves a real mess. And it's the kind of mess that sort of threatens your I guess, sense of security, but it also in some cases sort of threatens you financially there as well. You need the cleanup to take place. You need to put it all back together like it never even happened. Well, that's where my friends at Servpro can step in because that's what their restoration specialists will do for you. They'll take care of your cleanup. They'll take care of your kind of repair on that, and they'll get it all back the way that it was, like it never happened. That's what Servpro is famous for. Their franchises are also independently owned and operated, which means you're doing business with someone who has a stake in the outcome much the same way that you do. So my encouragement is to reach out to them online, servpro.com. That's SERV, servpro.com. Reach out to them today and let their restoration specialists do great work for you, cleaning up fire, water damage, whatever you might be dealing with, and leaving it like it never even happened. Trust Servpro for that today. All right, so here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether Tharp, before we're done on the show today, we have one of the funnier golden shoes we've had in quite some time. This is going to be really good. We'll do this here coming up in just a few minutes. But for now, more on that potent offense that Georgia showed on Saturday against Oregon, and what we might see as an encore this Saturday against the Samford Bulldogs. Let's do it all with Terence Edwards as a Marlow's Tavern insider update. Glad to have him and all of you with us here on the program today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Terence Edwards here, Marlow's Tavern Insider Update. And Terence, I know you love catching the football. You were famous for that during your playing career, certainly a record setter here at Georgia. And dogs were throwing it all over the yard on Saturday. And as I was saying before you joined us, a lot of that was going towards running backs. McIntosh over 100 yards receiving. Kendall Milton, who we just heard from, had a touchdown through the air. What did you think of the way in which Georgia got those running backs involved in the passing game on Saturday? How impressive was that for you to be able to see?
It's very impressive. I think that was the game plan, to kind of isolate the linebackers that I spoke about last week. So I think that was the best point of attack, is to isolate those linebackers against a really, really talented pass catcher in Kenny McIntosh. And I think Coach Monken and the crew did a great job of finding the weakness in that defense and exploiting it.
Is that what the game is now? I mean, it certainly seems like it is to me, whether you're watching on Sundays, Saturdays, even on Fridays. It seems like a lot of it now is, hey, get the ball to a playmaker, an athletic guy with some green grass around him, see if he can make somebody miss in front of him, and just really utilize those offensive weapons. And how can you creatively, and also in some cases just sort of simply, just get the ball out to somebody who can do something with it? Is that the evolution of the game that you're seeing right now as a coach yourself?
Oh, most definitely. Back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, it's really, let's run the running back down here 20, 25 times and try to pound it out. But now, the screen game, the flare game, the running back pass catching abilities, now it's the extension of playing running back. You're not going to see too much now that the running back is carrying it 25 to 30 times a game. He's probably going to get 20 to 25 touches, but it's going to be touches in space. And that's the name of the game right now, is spacing. You're not going to just line up in an I formation with the fullback and run power all game. No, you're going to line those guys out. You're going to screen them. You're going to put them in the pass-catching sections of the field. That's the name of the game right now, trying to find mismatches, and that's what Georgia did on Saturday.
Well, even in the sort of the pass game, I'm not sure how much of the Georgia Tech-Clemson game you got a chance to see on Monday, but some of the struggles that DJ Uiagalelei had, a lot of those passing plays they were calling for him, to me, just seemed like really slow developing. And if you don't have a great offensive line, then you're not going to give, your quarterback's not going to have enough time to distribute the football there in that situation. So, sometimes there's even kind of a slow, plodding way to throw the football, too, it would seem. And the exact opposite of that for Georgia, where I think that Georgia does have a good offensive line, could probably do almost anything that wanted to, at least with that group up front. But if you're not getting the ball out quickly, if you're doing one of these long play-action type deals where you're dropping way back trying to throw the football, that's another example of, there just may be a quicker way to get rid of the football and a better way to give guys a chance to do something. Even in the passing game, I think there's sort of a slow, plodding way to go about that, it seems.
Oh, most definitely. You just look at the complexities of defenses right now and the athletes that the defensive front have now. I mean, you got guys, the Clemson front, there's probably as a whole, there's probably not a better defensive front in college football. So you cannot sit back there and try to take a 7-step drop or a deep play action. You got to get the ball out quick into your playmakers' hands, and that's demoralizing to a defensive front when you work as hard as you do to try to get to the quarterback. And I think Tom Brady does this the best. He gets the ball out I think I read somewhere like 2.1 seconds. That's demoralizing to a
Yeah.
defensive front who's working their tails off to get to the quarterback, and the quarterback is somehow way scheming to get the ball out quick and negate the pass rush. And I think every top team right now has a defensive front that can rush the quarterback. So you have to be able to get the ball out quickly, pre-snap reads for the quarterback, and Stetson did a great job of finding the open mismatch.
Well, speaking of Stetson Bennett, it's been kind of a wild ride for him, as you know, maligned a lot over the course of the last couple of years, even last year along the way towards winning a national championship. And now, after one game of his final season here at UGA, boy, he's getting pats in the back now. And, obviously a lot of that's deserved, but, boy, it's been pretty intense there, too. Some NFL draft love, but in particular, you've seen a great drastic change in his Heisman Trophy odds there as well. Terence, you're a level-headed guy. You also understand the sport. How realistic do you think it is that Stetson Bennett could be a part of the Heisman conversation here this season?
If I'm telling the truth, I just don't think the national media will allow a former walk-on 5'11" guy to win the Heisman. That's just me. I think Stetson played the best game I've ever seen a Georgia quarterback play. He was calm, cool, collective. I said this after the game. That if we get that Stetson each week, we're going to compete for a national championship. But I don't see it. I don't think Stetson will be voted. I mean, just look at Will Anderson last year. Will Anderson, in my opinion, should have won the Heisman Trophy last year. He didn't get an opportunity to go. So it's up to the voters, and a lot of times it's who the voters like, the narrative. I guess it will be a great narrative for him to walk on win the Heisman Trophy, but I just don't see it. I would love for Stetson to win it, to just shut everyone up. I've been on the Stetson on his boat and driving that boat. That I think Stetson is the guy to lead us to where we need to be. And I tweeted L. Duncan this weekend, like, we all complain about the quarterback situation, but what are we going to do? Go in the transfer portal and find one? Start one of the young guys who does not have the experience he has? So what's the solution? I think the solution is what we saw on Saturday. Stetson is the guy to lead us to where we need to be.
Well, I think the one thing I've tried to do is be careful, because I thought last year at times there was a drastic overreaction when maybe things weren't perfect for Stetson. And on the flip side of that, I don't want to have the same kind of overreaction when he has a really good game. But the truth is probably always somewhere in the middle, or it's at least a more watered-down version of like the crazy, hottest takes imaginable that you sometimes see. And so I think it's, at least from my perspective, appropriate to kind of maintain the same mindset here of, okay, Stetson Bennett had a great game on Saturday, but this is a guy that we sort of thought was a good quarterback, so let's not make too much yet out of one game that's really, really good, the same way I would have encouraged folks a year ago not to make too much out of one game that might not have been, quite so good. That it's, I think, Terence, still appropriate to maintain some level of perspective with all of this.
I think so. I think, we as fans can go in and overreact. I think Georgia Bulldogs played a great game. I think Oregon defensively, if we really want to get down to the second level stats, were able to move the ball on us a little bit more than I like. They did finish the game with 21 first downs, and even when the starter was in, the first down comparison was very similar. We was more of a bend, don't break defense, and made great plays at the right time. But I like what I saw from a bunch of guys that didn't play a lot last year, especially in that linebacking core. That's a good start for them. I think that's now we just only continue to get better. I know Kirby and crew will continue to push these guys, but I like what I saw, and that's the testament of the way Kirby has recruited.
I'm curious your thoughts on this, because that's obviously a guy that you know very well. A lot of folks have asked about, hey, Eric Gilbert on Saturday. Georgia obviously, plays Brock Bowers a lot. Clearly Darnell Washington was going to be a little bit of a focal point, and they kind of got him involved pretty early based on the summer it sounds like he'd had. You understand that. But then, Eric Gilbert was a little later getting involved in the game. I think he, ended up playing a decent number of snaps, or at least a handful of snaps, and was targeted at least one time. But got in a little bit after Oscar Delp got in. What did you think about the way in which Eric Gilbert was used last week? And I guess your kind of overall assessment of the situation there at tight end, where there are a lot of really seemingly good players who are kind of trying to fight for their moment. What did you make of all that there last week?
Without being there and understanding what's going on a day-to-day basis, we don't know. I haven't spoken to anyone there, so I don't know why the rotation where it was. But I mean, if you just look at Darnell, you look at the way Brock played, and I know we have all this high expectations for Eric, and we all know the talent that he brings. But he just got to continue to earn and work and continue to earn his playing time, no matter how talented he is. And if he's not doing something to earn his playing time or whatever, then he's got to continue to work to get better. So, like I've been saying this whole time, BA, my goal and my All-American status for Eric did exactly what he done. He played a football game and was there with a team. And we all know the troubles and the trials and tribulations he's been through, and that was a win for me. Now he just got to continue to push. He got to continue to work and earn everything he gets.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that's really well said. We got more with Terence Edwards coming up. Let me remind you, this is Marlow's Tavern Insider Update here today. Let me also remind you about this. One of my favorite times of the year is now back at Marlow's. You could take advantage of this. It's the Ribs and Whiskey event. This is special menu, special cocktails, special opportunity to enjoy some great stuff at Marlow's Tavern. It comes to ribs and whiskey. Their barbecue, their ribs, special sauces and rubs they use. This is delicious. This is so much fun. One of my favorite times of the year. Y'all know we love Marlow's Tavern. A great event there last Thursday, but also a great promotion going on right now with ribs and whiskey. It goes between now and October the 3rd, so get in there and enjoy that. Try the fried macaroni and cheese as a side to go along with all of this. Try the just the incredible array of barbecue options, including those delicious ribs. Have yourself a whiskey to go with it and some of those special cocktails that the mixologist can make for you right there with all the chef-inspired food that goes down for you at your Marlow's Tavern, including the one right there in your neighborhood. So go to marlowstavern.com, find out more about that. Enjoy that at the tavern right there in your neighborhood. This is a great, great time to enjoy some delicious food from Marlow's Tavern. Ribs and whiskey, one of our favorite events they do throughout the year. Terrence, another event on Saturday is the home opener for Georgia against Samford. Our chance to be back between the hedges and to see Georgia in a game which expects to win easily, and also kind of an opportunity maybe for some guys to get a chance to play more than they have played, or for guys to kind of continue sending the message about what they expect to be here this season. As someone like yourself who played in games like this, who kind of understands this from the perspective of a coach there too, what are you looking to see from Georgia in this game against Samford on Saturday?
The leadership. I'm waiting to see who steps up to the plate and continue to lead this team, knowing that the opponent that we're playing is not on their level. It's easy to get up for an Oregon game. You've been working all year, all summer to face this team. Your old coach, Dan Lanning, is there. So it's a lot of hype around this game internally. So we understand that now. We playing a Samford team. Now, what's the hype now? What's the motivation factor to get up for this game? Now I'm just waiting on the leadership to not allow the young guys to be happy with their performance against Oregon. The great teams is consistent to play their best week in and week out, knowing that we do have South Carolina at William Bryce next week. Do we look ahead for that game? So I'm just looking for the leaders to keep these young guys level-headed and understand the magnitude of each Saturday, and each Saturday means something. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
And I guess along those lines, South Carolina, plays on the road at Arkansas on Saturday. That's a game we've been kind of fascinated with, and it's a big kind of opportunity for Spencer Rattler, who probably didn't have a great game against Georgia State this past Saturday, but along the same, wavelength of sort of watching Georgia as a preview of SEC play, but the idea of watching South Carolina in kind of a big road test prior to hosting Georgia, we might learn something about those Gamecocks there, and it might set up the stage for a little bit more interesting showdown in Williams-Brice than maybe it currently appears to be, based on however it kind of plays out there in Fayetteville on Saturday.
Oh, I think so. I think Arkansas is a hot team, and I think we all as Georgia fans kind of pull for Arkansas because of Coach Pittman. So I'm going to be pulling for Arkansas. I think Arkansas brings a legit team. So I think this is going to be a really, really good game. I think this is the first test that Spencer Rattler get to see what SEC football is about week in and week out. Now he understands he has to prepare for Arkansas this week. Now he has to prepare for Georgia the next week. So when you play an SEC schedule week in and week out, you have to bring your best. So I'm fascinated about this game, and I'm pulling for Arkansas and Pittman to beat South Carolina. But, William Bryce, someone asked me about some of the best stadiums I've played with. William Bryce is no joke to go and play it. So our guys got to be ultra-focused. It doesn't matter the outcome of the Arkansas game. To achieve all goals, you got to be 1-0 every Saturday.
No, I think that's exactly right, Terrence. I love that conversation with you. I enjoy having it with you post-game there as well. What a great time we had last Saturday for our DawgNation post-game show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Terrence, I look forward to that conversation here this Saturday there as well. A lot on what happens for Georgia against Samford, a little bit of preview for what's going to happen the following Saturday against South Carolina. I will see you after the game for all of that.
Oh, most definitely. I was happy to get back on the broadcast after the game and summarize what we saw. And I think all of us were feeling good, so hopefully we continue to feel good after each and every Saturday.
And don't forget, it won't just be us that's there on Saturday for that UGA Bookstore postgame show here with DawgNation. Also before the game there as well, former Dog National Champion quarterback Buck Bellew is signing autographs. Vince Dooley going to be there signing autographs, as he customarily is prior to those games. And how about former Dog Malcolm Mitchell on hand prior to the game, too. So great opportunity to see some former Dogs before the game. I'll see you there on the second floor after the game at the UGA Bookstore on Saturday. Terrence, we'll talk to you then. Thanks for being here as a part of our Marlow's Tavern Insider Update today.
Thank you, B.A.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
And, of course, if you want more information about the autographs and all the opportunities to kind of hang out pregame at the UGA Bookstore, go to UGABookstore.com on that. I was also there the other day, and I'll just tell you this really quickly. Their supply of, like, national championship gear and all that kind of stuff, man, it was so much fun to walk through that store the other day. I've always kind of liked the UGA Bookstore. Probably my favorite place to go get Georgia apparel, kind of always has been. The stuff they have right now, I've waited a long time to be able to see. Great-looking national championship logo and so much of that cool stuff. And so you can do some shopping. It'll be a great time to do that on Saturday, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you. You know, you stop by, you say hello to us. I appreciate that. It used to be, and I'll be very quick about this, and then we'll move on. It used to be that on the show, because it is a broadcast, right? We have to take it somewhat seriously. It used to be that when folks were kind of around, I would kind of have to be really focused on what we're doing, locked in on that camera, TV man, if you will. And now I've just kind of gotten to the point, if you come by and say hello, I'll break character. I'll break the fourth wall, and I'll say hello to you there, and we'll chat a little bit. Even while I'm on camera doing the show, we can be casual about some of that kind of stuff. So stop by and see us at the UGA Bookstore on Saturday. We'll look forward to seeing you there for that. And something else we'll look forward to seeing, that's all of you in the Bahamas coming up this April with our second ever cruise with DawgNation. Now, if you go to royaldogs.com, you can find out more about this. That late April sailing around the week of the NFL draft, enjoying some time on the Independence of the Seas, visiting Nassau in the Bahamas, visiting Perfect Day Coco Cay. And here's what you got to know. Anytime we're talking about taking a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, as I've told you, my itinerary searches always start with a trip to Perfect Day Coco Cay. So you better believe that if we're taking a DawgNation cruise, of course we're going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. It is single best, probably place I can spend the entire day. Last time, we just sort of parked ourselves in that big pool, largest freshwater pool in the Bahamas, and we just sort of hung out there the entire time. A lot of folks were doing, zip lining or certainly the water park and enjoying tallest water slide in North America. We were just chilled and relaxing. That's what it is. There's a chill side. There's a thrill side. You can do the thrill side and do all the water slides. You can do the chill side and kind of hang out, relax like we did, and make a bunch of trips to the bar. Either way, you're going to have a great time when it comes to a Perfect Day Coco Cay and the next iteration of the DawgNation cruise. So check that out, royaldogs.com, for more details on that. That's specific for the cruise. You can also call our friend Jessica Slater at 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. And look, do like me. Don't wait until April to take your next Royal Caribbean cruise. Take one before then. Do a practice cruise, because I need you, game face on, ready to go for the real one in April. So do yourself a practice cruise to get ready for what's going to happen there on April. We're going to have a great time. Independence of the Seas, royaldogs.com. That's the website to learn more about that. All right, let me start with what is, and I get to be a newsman when I say this. And, on TV, the newsmen always kind of like pop the papers. They keep papers in front of them, sort of pop their papers. So I'm going to pop the papers in the desk here and give you a little bit of newsman vibe. Late breaking into the show, Dabo Swinney has actually gotten himself a contract extension. Brett McMurphy of the Action Network reporting that Dabo Swinney and Clemson agreed to a new 10-year, $115 million contract through the 2031 season with the Tigers. So I'm not great at math, but 10 years, $115 million, that's 11.5 per year. So that puts him in the kind of same ballpark that Nick Saban's in, that Kirby Smart is in. Does that exceed the yearly value of the Kirby Smart contract? I honestly don't remember. It does exceed the Smart contract, just barely. So it's just barely above the Kirby Smart contract. So the guy that has, for now, one more national championship than Kirby has a slightly higher per-year average than Kirby Smart does. I'm not great with numbers. Don't really remember what the average per year was on Kirby, but that's what our producer, Michael Carvell, is saying. Let me tell you why I think this is interesting, and we're going to move on. I think the future is a little bit in doubt for Dabo Swinney. I think that people who are kind of like sort of casting Clemson aside because they were a little bit of a ugly showing in the early stages against Georgia Tech on Monday, that's an overreaction. Clemson still has an elite defense, and if you're elite on either side of the ball, you got a chance to be in contention because all you got to do is sort of find even good play on the other side of the ball. Like Ohio State, why they missed the playoff last year, because they had a great offense, but they couldn't find their pathway towards even being good defensively. They were sort of outside the top 40 from a defensive standpoint, but could they have even been good defensively to pair that with what they were doing offensively? That would have been a very, very difficult team to beat. So if you're great on one side of the ball, you give yourself a chance, but you've got to be at least good on the other side of the ball. Clemson may be great defensively again. I mean, when you look at guys like Trent Simpson, linebacker, obviously what they're doing, KJ Henry, Brian Brzee, he is who you thought he was. They're great defensively. If they make the switch at quarterback eventually, or if Uiagalelei just starts playing better, they may at least be good offensively, so they could be dangerous here this year. But there are a couple of things that seem to be going on in this Clemson program. Offensive line, I would say for Clemson right now, that still looks pretty weak. That's been an issue. It seems like it still is. But beyond that, Clemson's and Dabo Swinney, Dabo is not like Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is a head coach. He's in kind of that CEO role now. But Smart is also the kind of guy who's capable of doing the actual coaching. Smart knows the X's and O's. And this is not a shot at Dabo Swinney. I don't think that anybody would say this. This is not me trying to undermine him. People would openly acknowledge this. Dabo is not an X's and O's guy. He's never, he was wide receivers coach before he became head coach. So Dabo as a coach is always going to be more coordinator dependent than other coaches are going to be. Kirby could be his own defensive coordinator if he needs to be because he's got the acumen to be able to do that. Dabo, I would say, I'm not sure that he does. I'm not sure you want Dabo Swinney calling offensive plays for you. So you need that offensive coordinator. Now, right now, look at the offensive staff at Clemson. Do you feel good about this staff? When you look at the overall experience they have as coaches even, do you feel good about that? Now, defensively, they seem to be still fine, but they had Brent Venables there for a long time. What about when some of these guys start cycling out of the program? When there is no more KJ Henry, when there is no more Brian Brzee? How about the next generation of that Clemson defense? How good are they going to be without a Brent Venables as coordinator? Now, they may be fine. They may be plenty good, right? But they're still recruiting well defensively. Guys like Stephon Green in state, Vic Burley in state. They're clearly still winning some big battles when it comes to defensive recruits. But Dabo is a little bit of a coordinator-dependent coach. He's had really good coordinators, and Clemson's had great success. But now you're paying him big bucks over the course of the next 10 years. Is this still, the same kind of program that was making the playoff literally every year for as long as Clemson was? I don't know. They may make the playoff this year, and when I say I don't know, I'm not saying that I mean that literally. I literally don't know. There's a chance they still are. Boy, oh boy, there's a chance they're not either. Clemson, to me, is a fascinating story right now, but the program betting big on the future of Dabo Swinney. And by the way, it may be also eliminating any discussion with the idea that Dabo might eventually be the replacement for Nick Saban, because don't discount that as a part of this discussion too. Extension coming now when it does. Look, the Saban thing's not going to last forever. It's just not. I know Alabama fans think he's still going to be coaching there 50 years from now, but one of these days, it's not going to be Nick Saban anymore. Well, now that Clemson's sort of ponying up and giving Dabo this kind of contract, does that take Dabo out of the running for a job like that? That's at least worth putting as an addendum to that discussion there. As far as the rest of the SEC news goes here for a moment, interesting recruiting news yesterday. TJ Shanahan, offensive lineman out of the state of Texas, at one point in time kind of on Georgia's radar as a recruit. He is now committed to Texas A&M. So a little bit of a win here for the Aggies when it comes to a recruiting battle here. That's a guy that I think a lot of Georgia fans kind of liked. You had not really heard a lot about Shanahan in Georgia there in sort of the last however long. But for a Texas A&M team that was a little bit dormant for a while in recruiting, all of a sudden they're starting to kind of come alive here a little bit. I think Shanahan probably represents a pretty good win there for them. So at least wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. I'll also mention this. We've talked a lot about the big games in the SEC, and we're going to do a lot more of that tomorrow. We'll get heavier into Arkansas, South Carolina one final time, Alabama on the road at Texas, Florida, Kentucky. We'll kind of do a lot of that heavy tomorrow, and we'll also invite you to check out Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, Friday night on the DawgNation video channels, where we talk about all of that even more. But I do briefly here want to mention just some of the other games, under-the-radar games, that we might not have much more of a chance to talk about. By the way, Tennessee-Pitt, I think, is also one of those games that's worth your attention. We'll talk more about that. So let me kind of rattle off a couple of quick thoughts here for a moment, and then we'll get ready to wrap all of this up. I think Wake Forest, Vanderbilt, believe it or not, is probably more interesting than you might think, just because Vanderbilt is 2-0. Sam Hartman's coming back for Wake Forest. This should probably be an easy win for the Demon Deacons, but I don't know. I mean, if you've got at least 1 ounce of attention being paid towards a Vanderbilt team trying to get 3-0, it might be worth that. Missouri trying to get a 3-0 is even more interesting. Now they're in the Little Apple in Manhattan against Kansas State. Kansas State was one of the darlings of the offseason. It's kind of a chic pick to win the Big 12, and so I guess you got to consider that there. Missouri's actually a pretty big underdog here in this spot. Missouri's also probably looked better through 2 games than maybe some folks expected them to. Luther Burden clearly appears to be the real deal, so keep your eye on Eli Drinkwitz's charges there coming up on Saturday. I definitely think Appalachian State going to Texas A&M is pretty interesting. Appalachian State is a team that scored 40 points in the fourth quarter last Saturday and lost to North Carolina. It's very difficult to do. But with Chase Bryce at quarterback, you'll remember him. That's the former Clemson quarterback that was at, I think, Duke for a minute. Now he's at Appalachian State. He's transferred like a million times. So with Bryce at quarterback for Appalachian State, they are good offensively. And y'all, it's not obvious that Texas A&M is. So this is one of those deals on Saturday where A&M may be playing either the exact right opponent so we can kind of show what it is offensively, or the exact wrong opponent there too. And don't forget this, A&M's got Miami the following week. That's a pretty big non-conference game. Game day is going to be there, I think. Pretty big deal week 3 with Miami going to Texas A&M, sort of the NIL Bowl, if you will. If you're A&M, you got to be careful here with Appalachian State, and you got to try to find a way to show some offense, because they may score some points on you and put pressure on you to move the football. And I think a lot of folks kind of opened their eyes and were a little bit surprised when Max Johnson didn't win the starting job at Texas A&M. Well, if Haynes King's going to be that guy, Saturday's the day to show that. So I would say that A&M is probably worth your attention on Saturday against Appalachian State. I also think another somewhat interesting game on Saturday is Mississippi State going the road to Arizona. There is some talk that Arizona may be a little bit better than they have been. Decent quarterback play they've gotten here thus far from Jaden DeLaura. But for Mississippi State, you had big numbers week 1 for Will Rogers at quarterback against Memphis. You've got a little bit of belief here that they have a chance to, with a third-year quarterback, moving into year 3 of Mike Leach's system there. There's a little bit of belief that, hey, maybe Mississippi State's kind of onto something. There's also some thought that what they did last Saturday in kind of a revenge game because they lost in controversial fashion to Memphis the prior year. Maybe that's an outlier. But it's a late game. It's like 11 p.m. Eastern. Like this is a late game way out there in Tucson against Arizona. But for a future Georgia opponent, Dogs go to Starkville in November. I'd tell you, you probably ought to be watching what happens with Mississippi State on the road to Arizona, because if they go in that spot, win that game easily, that tells you something. And if they can't win it easily, if they're in kind of a fight against Arizona, then this is probably the same Mississippi State team that it's sort of been in the past. That's worth your attention. And those are some of the under-the-radar games for the SEC here this week, and we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And by the way, worth your attention, how about the Atlanta Braves? They are worth your attention right now, getting the 2-game sweep against the Oakland Athletics. Mets won both games of a doubleheader yesterday, so it's a battle down to the wire when it comes to Braves and Mets, as the Braves try to win the division for the 5th year in a row. And the Braves need you back in Trueist Park when the Braves return home once this road trip is done. So when you start looking ahead to September 16th to the 21st, Braves got 2 big series coming up against the Nationals and the Phillies. And so you want to celebrate all these young guys for Atlanta that come in and made big contributions, Vaughn Grissom and Michael Harris II, Spencer Strider on the mound. You want to appreciate all of them. Be in Trueist Park September 16th to the 21st to be a part of all of that. Also, we told you about this earlier this week. How about coming up on September the 20th, that really cool Ron Washington bobblehead that's the windmill wash, the great third base coaching move where he's winding up. Ron Acuna's always ignoring it, but nonetheless, you get the wind up going with Wash there. You want the windmill Wash bobblehead. First 15,000 through the door there on September 20th. Get one of those. So Braves need you. Around here we talk about the lousy, stinking Gators all the time. They're orange and blue. Guess what? That same level of hatred you take for that version of the orange and blue, you can point that same level of hatred towards the New York Mets there as well, because it's another orange and blue team we don't like very much. And we think the Braves are hard-charging and relentless on their way to a 5th consecutive National League East title. So go to Braves.com/tickets. Be in Trueist Park here down the stretch against the Nationals, against the Phillies, and get ready to root the Braves home to another National League East crown and maybe a return trip to the World Series there as well. Braves.com/tickets for a lot more on that. So hopefully our golden shoe is fun for you each and every day, and I would say that it's been a while here since we've had one funnier than the one I want to show you today. It comes via video, and it was shared with me. I want to show you this on the screen here just for a moment. So Joshua Campbell sent this to me, and one of those like viral accounts, Georgia followers, tweets this. So here are a bunch of Georgia fans, and they're at their tailgate on Saturday, for those of you not watching on video. And so every time an Oregon fan walks by, they take a loaf of bread, they peel off some of the bread, and they throw it at the Oregon fan like it's a duck. You know, you ever go feed the ducks? If you got young kids like to go feed ducks. And you take old bread and you do that. Like, this is so funny. Now, listen, as an official member of the media, I can't condone you throwing things at other fans. But unofficially, this is really, really funny. This is really, look at that Oregon fan reaction to this. Joshua Campbell, thanks for sharing that with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen that. So we'll give you a golden shoe. Dog fans having a good time there on Saturday. How about lousy, stinking Gators? They're not having much fun, and they're not having any reason to celebrate right now. It's been 4,991 days since they have won a national championship. Boy, that's tough. And how about 51 days from right now? Dogs back in Jacksonville, beating Florida again. That is our Gator Hater countdown. And by the way, you see Eddie the Blind Squirrel, the beautiful oil paint of him there on the wall. If you want your own Eddie t-shirt, go to DawgNation.store. That's DawgNation.store. Why is that so hard for me to say? DawgNation.store, and you can get an Eddie t-shirt today. It's a great new shop there for DawgNation. You can check that out. DawgNation.store for a lot more on that. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that today. And we're glad to have them on board. Looking forward to Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews on Friday, and looking forward to your comments here right now. So we'll take those. We're going to bounce off here, 15 minutes worth or so, and be kind of out of here after that. So hope you're all doing great, and we'll kind of roll through these. Let me start on Facebook for a moment, and hopefully we won't spend too much time on any one comment section, just so we kind of keep it fair and balanced and do what we do around here. All right. Boom. On Facebook, Miriam Corbin, always great to see her. Phil Rogers, looking forward to that game in Jacksonville later on this year. Appreciate that, Phil. Craig Baker says Brenton Cox is, quote, Florida man. That's really funny. Brandon Griffin says a former walk-on for Heisman is actually a great story. Needs a hashtag. I would agree with you on that. I understand the point that Terence was making earlier. I get his point, but I sort of agree with you too that I think once the steam kind of gets rolling on this, that Stetson might actually be helped with his story, helped by his story, that people might buy into it more because of that. I sort of agree with you on that. But the key is that you do have to put up really good numbers. It's one of those things where it's almost more important to put up good numbers early, more so than putting up good numbers late, because like once you're in the Heisman, conversation, Georgia just winning might be enough to keep you there. But in order to get yourself there, you have to demonstrate that you are a player alongside the guys who have a little bit better, recruiting, whatever, and things like that. And what's kind of funny too is like C.J. Stroud's going to probably be a top 5 pick, but it's not like he was just this all-world recruit either. Eventually he sort of became that, but for a while it's not like he was necessarily like, this sort of can't-miss prospect as a recruit in his own right. Bryce Young sort of always was. But Bennett, if he can demonstrate a level of play that is at least resembling what Young has done or what Stroud is doing, then he's sort of in the club at that point in time, and then you can kind of just sort of ride the steam for Georgia the rest of the way. And his story might actually help propel him there in that regard. But the first part of that is to kind of recast himself, to repackage himself as a player who's playing at that level, and clearly that's what Saturday was for him for sure. Matt Rukavina says, can't bring myself to take Tennessee even as favorites, just don't see it. I get the trepidation there. I do like Tennessee on Saturday. In fact, you're going to hear me say on Go With The Flow later on this week, on Friday night, that I actually might consider taking Tennessee on kind of an alternate line. If you go to my bookie, obviously the spread has been 6.5, 7, something like that. I might consider, with better odds, taking Tennessee minus 14 or something along those lines. I could see Tennessee actually not just winning, but winning somewhat convincingly on the road on Saturday because, look, I don't think Tennessee's good enough to threaten Georgia. I don't even think that's close. But do I think that Tennessee's better than it's been and one of the more dangerous teams in the SEC because of what they do offensively? Yeah, I think they might be. And I think on Saturday against Pitt might be an example of showing that. Bryson Lee reaching out to say that he lost his father. Boy, I'm so sorry to hear that, Bryson. It brings me back to a couple of years ago when I was in that same situation, and it's incredibly hard. I'm so sorry for you. I lost my dad during football season there as well. I think about that game. It happened to be Missouri in 2020. It was a road game for Georgia, but I was on my way to go, had plane tickets, things like that, and just ended up not doing it. And it just that I always sort of carry that memory with me. So I appreciate you stopping by and being a part of our conversation. If there's anything we can do to provide you comfort, we'll certainly try to do that the best that we possibly can. But I know this is a hard time for you, so I'm sorry. Jesse Dellinger also reminding us there has been a walk-on win the Heisman before. That's what Baker Mayfield did, and I'd say that probably helped make Baker's story a little bit too. But we're kind of in a day and age now where the stats are such a big part of all of this, and the stats have gotten so pronounced for these players in recent years that some of what kind of pushes a guy like Baker was not just his story as a former walk-on, but the fact they were just putting up big numbers in that Lincoln Riley offense. And so even with kind of a cool story, which I believe that Bennett really has, he's going to need a pretty big stat line to get him there. He doesn't need necessarily the biggest of all, because Georgia winning would aid him, and his kind of unique aspect of his story would help him a bit too. But there's a certain threshold for stat line that you probably have to cross over there on that. David West, calling him the Postmaster General. I do like that as a nickname. I do. I like that as a nickname a lot. Marcus Chafin, appreciate you reaching out to Bryson about that. I do. Look, I love the fact that so many of you have kids that get born. Some of you have had grandkids that get born, and you come in here and you show us those pictures, and we celebrate the good times, and we kind of coalesce around the bad times, and that's just what community is supposed to be about. And this is, to me, supposed to be a community. So, today we got somebody like Bryson who's in here hurting, and by the way, there are a lot of you who are kind of hurting too. And like here's the other thing that I know, and I was talking to some of y'all about this on Saturday. Only a small portion of the audience, like less than 1% of the audience, gets to, or maybe 2%, but only it's just a small portion of the audience gets to participate in the show live. For the average person, they'll never get a chance to watch the show live. That's just not the way they consume the product for a million different reasons. And so even for those people that we don't hear from a comment standpoint, it's the same type of deal where, hey, if you're in the car right now listening to me talk, you may be driving towards something good, something you want to be doing. Or you may be driving towards something you hate, some sort of job you hate, or some sort of, tough set of circumstances you found yourself in, and yet somehow, some way, we still get to be the soundtrack with you for all of that. So that's the kind of thing I take very seriously, is that all of you have a life that's going, and kind of parallel to that, you have, a little bit of your time that you share with us. So I try to put myself in the sort of frame of mind that the people I'm talking to are living busy lives. Like with the Apple thing yesterday, where like the podcast's not working. Like that's a much bigger issue for me than it is for many of you, because y'all are busy, you're doing whatever else. And so I want to make sure that I try to do my best to communicate what's going on, because I know for a lot of people, they don't have time to go seek something out if it doesn't show up the way they're used to it showing up. I appreciate those of you that do. I greatly appreciate that. But when it comes to, when it comes to, people who just, don't have time for that, I have respect for that. I have respect for your time, however it is that you're using it. And I also have respect for the idea that, you join us during good and bad times of your life. And hopefully we understand the fact that there's always a lot going on in the lives of the audience who's out there. Let's see what else. Let's see what else is going on. Kirby's Belt says they found a spot on my son's brain on Wednesday. Hopefully it's nothing. Yeah, I hope that there as well. But that's another example of something that we'll absolutely be in prayer about and just thinking about. And, that's a serious deal, man. That's a serious deal. Anything related to your children. So we will definitely think about that and be praying about that. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. I really do. I really do. In fact, you're already seeing a lot of Georgia fans kind of reacting to that. So thank you for sharing that. Jalen Jackson, subject of cover 4. So we do have some plans to do something like that again. I think the problem that we're kind of running into is the dance card on the nighttime show is getting pretty full. Between, Connor doing what he's doing, Mike does the Monday night thing each and every Monday night. Jeff's got his Wednesday show. I think part of the issue with that is the dance card for some of those night shows starts to get just a little bit full. We're all together for Go With The Flow on Friday, so you might enjoy that. We're making our picks. We're doing things like that. But we also have some cover 4 type plans there, too. It is a little bit different, I will admit that. But you're going to see a version of that here in the future, too. So that's not done forever. We're just doing things a little bit differently on that right now. JC, looking back to Kirk Warner, that's a former Georgia tight end who's also the high school coach for Richard LeCount, passed away recently. Sad and a really scary situation when a guy like that gone too soon. We talked about that when it happened. That was awful. Quabna Fields checking in. Waycross in the building. Where's my Jessup folks at? You love to see that. Quabna, thanks for being here today. Let's see what else is going on. A lot of good comments. A lot of folks having a good time. Foster Moss says, do you think we see Gunnar Stockton there on Saturday? I don't know that Georgia will play 4 quarterbacks. It'd be cool if they did, but I don't quite know if they're going to be able to play 4 on Saturday. But I will tell you this. I've heard a lot of good things about Gunnar Stockton. And when you start thinking ahead to that 2023 season, I think Gunnar could be heard from in that year. It seems like Gunnar's had a really good offseason. Jake Fromm kind of talked about that a little bit the other night. That it sort of seems like, Gunnar's had a pretty good offseason. And so when you start thinking about his chance to kind of make that move might be next year. As I've talked about plenty before, obviously we know what the starting quarterback does. We have an idea of what the number 2 quarterback does. That number 2 quarterback's getting number 2 reps. It means he's practicing some in the number 1 offense and also kind of practicing some in kind of a number 2 quarterback type situation. Also, we know that number 4 quarterback has a pretty big role in practice as the season goes along, kind of working as that scout team quarterback. And that's where Stetson Bennett originally made a name for himself. And that's where you get a chance to battle against that great Georgia defense each and every day. That's a proving ground. It's a training ground there as well. So I think that Gunner's in a pretty good role on that. No disrespect to Brock Vandegrift, who I presume right now is the number 3 quarterback, but I would much rather be the number 4 quarterback than the number 3 quarterback. And I said this a year ago when it kind of seemed like Carson Beck might be the number 3 quarterback. Whoever it is, it's like, well, I know what the number 1 guy does. I know what the number 2 guy does. I know what the number 4 guy does. But what does number 3 guy do at quarterback? That's the guy that you sometimes wonder, Okay, how is he getting those practice reps? I'm sure he's doing things that, supplement, whatever's happening during the normal practice. But I think actually being that number 4 quarterback and getting a chance to work in that scout team situation, if that's what Gunner's going to kind of do this year, I think that's a pretty good spot for him. Even if we're not seeing him a lot in games, and admittedly playing 4 quarterbacks would be a lot for Georgia on Saturday. Brian McPhail says, if rain's in the future, how many passing yards will Georgia get on Saturday? Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it depends on how much it's going to rain. We'll have Ella Dorsey on the show tomorrow, and she can tell us about that. But I think it's fair. I think it all depends on how much rain there actually is. Let's see what Green Soul tried to say. Green Soldier says, I think we do see 4 quarterbacks because this year seems like we're trying to eliminate a lot of narratives. Maybe I'm overzealous, but I hope so. I mean, I think the problem is that have you ever heard the old line, if people used to say, well, if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. I think there's maybe a version of that. If you're playing 4 quarterbacks, then you're not really playing anybody. And so you're dividing up the reps so much that you're maybe not giving anybody as much time as you'd like to have. So I think there's a fine line here between giving everybody a look and not giving anybody a long enough look. Because Beck's your guy who's been here the longest. And that's the guy that you probably want to see what you have in him because he's now been here. This is what he's been here, 3 years, something like that. He's been here for a while now. And, kind of finding out what you have in him, I think would be appropriate. So if you play 4 guys, that's less you're playing back. Or if you get Vandergrift in the game, now all of a sudden you're only getting him in for a cup of coffee because you're also trying to get Stockton in the game too. I'm not saying they won't do that. I'm saying there is a way to try to play so many guys that you end up not playing anybody enough. And Stockton's going to have his chance to show what he's all about. He really is. I don't think it's an indictment on him whatsoever if he doesn't play at all on Saturday, nor do I believe he would view it that way. But in the case of Vandegrift, in the case of Beck, you probably do want to learn a little bit what you have in those guys, see how they respond in a situation like this, how much growth they've kind of shown. So if you play 4, that's less time you're playing them. And you say, well, just take Stetson out sooner. I mean, maybe that's what they'll do, but they're still going to treat this like a game, and and hopefully it plays out to be as much of a laugh as we all think it's going to be. But Georgia's still going to treat this like a game. Let me go over to DawgNation.com for a moment. This is the portion of the show where I've got so many browsers open; it's sort of hard to find what I'm doing here. Bobby says Samford's going to test our DBs this week, especially the younger ones. They're going to toss the ball around a lot. Can't wait to see what the back end does against them. I think it's probably right. I think they'll try that. I mean, if you're Samford, you don't there are some FBS level teams that sort of benefit from a game being closer than the experts think it's supposed to be, and sometimes they coach that way. Samford doesn't benefit from this game being any closer than people thought it was going to be. If anything, they sort of benefit from coming out and trying their best stuff to see what works. And they can really, they have a chance to get better in kind of a blowout situation if that's the case. I think most people would tell you, Chris Hatcher was considered a smart coach well before he was sort of thought of as a mentor to Kirby Smart. Hatcher's a name we've been hearing about for a long time, even apart from just his relationship with Kirby Smart. So is Hatcher the kind of coach that's capable of devising something that has the potential of working? I would say from a coaching standpoint, he probably is. So they're going to try some stuff, I would think. And if you try enough stuff, you may even hit a few things here and there. Terrence brought this up on the show. I think it's a really good point. Oregon did have 21 first downs there on Saturday. So I think, is that the number? I think that's what he said. So, just be careful here about, if you're Georgia defensively, you don't want a leaky game again on Saturday, especially against a lower level of opponent. The scoreboard looked almost perfect for the Dogs last week. On kind of a play-to-play, yardage basis. I'm imagining that Georgia defense probably wants to do something there on Saturday related to that. Randy Hall says, how many sacks this Saturday? I'm going to say that Georgia gets some. I know that Hatcher's going to probably try to do what Oregon did, maybe get rid of it pretty quick, but I'm going to give you 3 or 4 on Saturday. I think they kind of get that going a little bit. I hope they do anyway. Johnny Surfdog says, true about Carson playing well. It's so nice seeing the quarterbacks develop nicely. I wonder how much Coach Bobo has helped the improvement there. I think that Bobo's presence on this staff is probably a value add. I really do. This is a guy that when he was offensive coordinator here last year in 2014, Georgia was very good that final season with Mike Bobo's offensive coordinator. And he clearly, is kind of a sharp mind, former head coach. That's a good pair of hands to have around the program, I think. Bobby says Kirby and Monken do a good job of building the offense around the quarterback. That is at the time. Yeah, maybe so. Hunker Down 93, giving you a little "We Are the Champions." I'd love to see that. T-Bone checks in to say it's also interesting how no one has mentioned how great Carson Beck played. I'm a Stetson fan, but it's the system more than the quarterbacks. I definitely agree that Georgia has a really effective offensive system, and I believe when it comes to college football, play caller is still incredibly valuable. I think having a good play caller, having a smart offensive mind really helps. That you can be a great quarterback, but if you're in a deficient offense, you're not going to succeed. You're just not. That scheming guys open, creating likelihood of success, I think it does matter. And obviously with Todd Monken, Georgia's trying to build an offense that works no matter who the quarterback in the game is. Let's see what else. Richard D says, I was reminded about your point about Bama and player durability. Georgia's recruiting smarter with our tight ends and larger receivers like Dylan Bell. If we have healthy, CJ and Arian Smith, it's going to be a bonus. Yeah. I think you're right about that, Richard. And we have talked about that before, as you point out, that football is not a there's a big sign in the meeting room for Georgia where they also have the press conference, but it's like the team meeting room, and they use it for press conferences there as well. Big on the big back wall, it says football is not a contact sport, it's a collision sport. A big sign that says that, and it is true. And in a collision sport, obviously size and strength are going to help you. And clearly there's a version of the sport played with speed, and smaller guys are going to be faster. But if you have too many guys who bring that speed but don't have the size, the strength to endure the collisions, then you're going to pay a price for that over the course of the long haul. Next time in there, I'll try to take a picture of that for y'all. Let's see what else. Randy Glass says, what would be a win on Saturday given this won't be much of a competitive game? Yeah, I think that different people are going to define that different ways. For some people, seeing all those quarterbacks is going to be their version of the win. I told you before, I'd like to see Brock Bowers, who I do think is a special player. I'd like to see him have a big statistical game to kind of get him on the pace that I think he could be at by the end of the season. I'd like to see some explosive runs on Saturday. I don't want to see, I talked about this during the show, but I don't want to see Georgia 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but I'd like to see some 15, 20-yard runs. I'd like to see Georgia, take advantage of an overmatched opponent and do some of that. And obviously, just a chance to see more of these guys that we don't see as much of, that can kind of feel like a win too. Staying healthy, getting ready to go on the road in the SEC next week, maybe the biggest one of all. Jerry Moore asking about the tag. So that's Gator Hater. It's G with an 8. That's Gate. Add the R to it. That's an R. Gator, and then H added to the A and the R. That's Gator Hater with the 8 playing the role of the letters there on that. All right, final comments, and we got to go. Swade says, I can remember when we were gridlocked with North Texas at halftime. Now we're talking about playing scout team against non-FBS opponents. He says, how times have changed. That is indeed the case, and a great comment, Swade. Over here there as well, Philip Jordan Wells picking Georgia to beat South Carolina by 28 points. That's already a big statement looking ahead 2 Saturdays from now. Don't let Kirby catch us looking ahead, but I know where you're coming from there on that. John Main says, this is on YouTube, people who are worried about Georgia not being running back U anymore aren't paying attention to the trend of the NFL. Very few backs in the NFL that don't rotate or that don't catch passes. So a good, strong comment from John on that. Brandon Alvin says, if it rains on Saturday, should I take the under because I doubt a lot of points are going to be scored. So my advice is, in all seriousness, is you're going to be really careful betting an FCS game at all. It's just a very high variance type deal. So it seems like conventional wisdom, more rain, very high point total. Georgia's like a 52-point favorite, that likely to have less scoring. But you could also have more scoring, right? Because if you're the better athlete, you're going to be more sure-footed. And an inferior athlete trying to make a tackle on slippery turf, well, that could create a scenario where there's even more scoring. So you got to be careful, like rubber stamping some of that kind of stuff. That would I be running to the bet window because of a lot of rain on Saturday? I'd be just as cautious about this game as I would be, another like big point spread with a very big imbalance of talent on the teams. Maybe Georgia wins by 49 and are just as dominant as can be, but that's still not a cover. Maybe Georgia wins by 60, but it's because of some sort of late defensive score. And for those of y'all who want to play, 18 different quarterbacks, then who's to say how all of that goes? And does that create a chance for a late score late for Samford because the ball gets coughed up or something like that? That these FCS level games are, very, very high variance. They're going to have, I believe, 13 other chances to bet on Georgia here this year. My advice would be to find another game besides this one to bet. Although, if it's just for the fun of making a pick, I'll take Georgia minus the 52 in rain or shine. But I certainly wouldn't put my own money at risk on that. That's just my opinion. All right, we got to go for now. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you being a part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. Y'all check out the AJC online, ajc.com. Braves coming back, staying out west, playing Seattle here starting tomorrow. So get ready for that. Falcons on Sunday against the Saints. NFL begins tonight. A lot of NFL stuff online. Our buddy Michael Cunningham, the columnist, got a look at the upcoming weekend here in sports there on that. Also, a really good sort of tailgating look here at some in the e-paper when it comes to some of the great tailgating options for you as we kind of roll through the season there as well. So a lot going on. You can check it all out, ajc.com for that. Also our friends at R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day, but you've got to find them online at rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.